What's good, you bunch of chads? Right, a few of you have asked me to run through an updated build list that I'm using for Night Rain. Now, with the update due to drop any minute now, the DLC 2.0, I thought it'd be a good time to just show you the kind of builds that I'm still using in Depth 5 for all of the Nightfarers. So, for today, we are going to go through the top 5, the old school base top 5, Wylder, Guardian, Raider, Duchess, and the Ironeye. And then in a separate video, I'll cover the rest of the Nightfarers, so you guys haven't got to spend 20 minutes waiting for me to yap covering every single Nightfarer in one video. Now, for the sake of the video, we aren't going to cover things like double balancers and the Knight of Dregs, because if we're being honest, those are the best builds in the game, and they work for pretty much all characters. Like even the Recluse, you can have a Knight of Dregs Recluse build, double balancer Wylder, double balancer Executor, all those kind of things. So yeah, for the sake of the video, Knight of Dregs is not being covered, and the double balancers is not being covered. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Let's talk about the main man first, John Night Rain himself. And now with Wylder, there are a few different types of builds that you can actually use. The main ones that I use is a straight sword build, which is this one here, and then we also have a normal build. Now, for the normal build, essentially what we're running is, it's a low RNG build for the most part. So you've got a red balancer relic. Everyone knows how strong the red balancer relic is. A Night Invader relic, obviously on this one, it's a god tier roll, I can't even deny that. But the standard attacks enhanced with fiery follow-ups when using the character skill, not really that important for this build. It's obviously really good for adding affinity to your weapon. So if you're fighting someone like Caligo or Nosta, you know, it just adds a little bit more damage. And obviously for Caligo, you can obviously get the debuff from the fire. But the most important part is the Night Invader relic. Night Invader, most of the time you're going to have 3 Night Invaders. So it basically acts like another skill balancer relic if you need to go the balancer, the skill play. And then of course, we've got a 0 RNG, the Wylder's Earring, which obviously is from his Remembrance. For the Deep Relics, we're just essentially stacking physical and HP. And then on the last one, we have his character skill, Inflicts Blood Loss. So yeah, those two builds are the ones that I use most of the time. Straight swords, get the ornamentals. You don't even need to make them holy. So if you're fighting a boss that is weak to holy, you can buff them for the holy damage, the holy affinity on the weapon. But for the most part, the ornamentals have a B scaling in both strength and dex, which means if you don't buff them, they're still going to do crazy damage. Now, saying that, if you wanted a build that was high in damage, and you know, doesn't need to be like a Dregs build, as I mentioned, we're going to leave the Dregs builds out of this, you can use something like this. This, of course, does require a little bit more RNG, and you are missing the earring, or at least you're missing the +1. That's the most important part, really. But essentially, with this build, 3 great swords gives you 20%, and then the successive tally gives you around 21%. So already you're getting like, you know, 42+% on your damage, and most of the time you're going to have 2 great swords for jump attacks anyway, if you're going the jump attack route. And then of course on the Deep Relics, it's the same as all my other builds. Physical with his blood loss, physical and HP, and then physical and HP. So for Wylder, those 3 builds, essentially you can't go wrong with them. Those 3 builds will carry you in most situations as long as you're finding the passives for the run. Now, the great thing about Wylder is you can basically change Wylder's playstyle throughout the run as you're going through. So you don't have to stick to one playstyle because he is the jack of all trades, master of none. You can basically put him into any situation, find the right passives, and you can switch through the run to still make it a strong build. So with the Wylder, all I can say is basically as you go through the run, try and stick to a certain playstyle, but if it's not working out, you know, you can always jump to like 2-handing, 2 armaments. Melee attack power is obviously the best because that, you know, happens for everything. So yeah, the Wylder, jack of all trades, master of none. Those are the builds that I use for him. And yeah, passives on the run is going to give you the most damage. Next up, we have the Guardian. Now, realistically, for Depth 5, there's only really one kind of playstyle that you want to use for the Guardian, and that's his biggest damaging playstyle, and that is guard counters. Guard counters is where you're going to get the most benefit from the Guardian, because at the end of the day, he is the guard counter guy. Now, it's not to say that you can't put his relic on that changes his stats to give you more strength and dex, because with that relic on, he does become the strongest Nightfarer in the game, outside of maybe Raider with all his character skills on. But yeah, for damage, the best thing to do for the Guardian is go guard counters. Now, my guard counter build is perfect, and it really is. It's heavy reliant on RNG, so you're not going to be able to recreate this really. But basically what we've got is guard counter given HP boost on the current HP, and then we've got the guard counter, the Night Vader relic on the bottom. So what we've got is basically guard counters all across the board. We've got the guard counter is given a boost based on current HP, a Night Invader relic, And then we obviously got his character skill, which is the successful guardsman that shockwaves. And then we've got the slowly restores nearby allies HP. You've got to remember, you're still the Guardian. Your main role is to still keep everyone alive. If you can put guard counters +2s on with HP, then you need to do that, because that's how you get the most benefit from the guard counter, is given a boost based on current HP. Guard counters +2 is obviously what you want to go for, but guard counters +1 is fine. Guard counters on their own, just the base version, you can either do that or you can just stack physical attack power, because they're pretty much the same. I think the physical attack +4 is like 12, and then the guard counters is like 15. So basically, it doesn't really matter if you've only got guard counters +1. Go all in for physical, and that way you're getting damage throughout the run. Now, of course, normally if you wasn't running a guard counter build, I would advise going into physical negation. Physical negation is just going to make you survive longer. HP is not better than physical negation, despite what a lot of people will tell you. The only reason we're running HP is so we can get the maximum boost from the guard counter is given a boost based on current HP, because that's how we're going to get the most damage. But for the guard counters, for the Guardian, this is the build that I run for it. An honourable mention is this build here. It is a Dregs build, so we've got essentially a Balancer relic. We've got the Dregs relic, the Night Dregs, and then we've got Seppuku. On the Deep relics, we've got guard counters, and then we've got Dormant Great Swords with the Strength Dex relic. The reason why this build is so strong is if you get something like Shield Crash, you're already getting the 45% damage boost from the Dregs, got 20% or 21% from the Wheel of the Balance, and then you've got guard counters if you're not going that way for a skill shield. So you still got the damage coming from the guard counters. The Dormant Claws obviously does clash with the, Discover's Great Shields, but most of the time you are going to get a Great Shield when running that relic, so it just works out really well. Now, this is really good for bosses like Nostat, because if you get the Fire Shield, the Visage Shield, you can basically just burn them to death and you'll do so much damage whilst also being able to stay alive. It's just a really good build. And again, it's quite a low RNG build. Like, 2 of those relics are guaranteed, and the rest of it is just stack guard counters or stack physical, whatever you want to do. But essentially, this is a honourable mention, and it is a very good build to use. Next up, we got the guy who can make or break a team. You can either have an absolutely cracked Ironeye, or you can have an Ironeye that's just a hindrance throughout the whole run. Now, you can go a couple of different styles with Ironeye. You can, of course, go like a status route where you can poison the boss, have poison attack power-ups, do it that way, use his character skill to do burst damage, and just essentially just play support with ranged option. Or what you can do is you can use, which in my opinion is the best way to play Ironeye, is a melee skill build. So for the build, we have Wheel of the Balance, the Glass Necklace, a Night Invader. We've got a +1 there. Realistically, if this didn't have +1 and Night Invaders on, I would have this swapped out for a +1, and then I would have a Night Invader relic. But I've got the relics to be able to do it, so that's what I use. And then for the Deep relics, we have Dormant Katanas with physical +3, a physical with his character skill and partial. And then on the bottom relic, this is probably my favourite relic that I have throughout the whole entire game. We have a attack up when phasing a poison afflicted enemy +2, frost afflicted enemy +2, and then we got a physical +3. The reason why it works really well, because you can get 2 out of the 3 katanas you can get are a poison and a frost katana. So if you can get both of those, or you can poison them with the Ironeye's Mark, essentially with this relic alone, you're getting over 50% damage increase. That paired with the skill relic, and then we got the successive relic if you're using the Rivers of Blood. A couple of R2s, you're going to start buffing yourself. And then you compare that with, like, millicents and all that kind of stuff. You can make this build insanely cracked. So this is the build I would run for Ironeye. Another honourable mention for Ironeye is we have a Dormant Fist build. Now, there's a reason for it. Bear with me. We have Night Invaders, Dormant Fist, and then we got a +1 with the, damage negation knockback. Obviously, that doesn't really matter for Ironeye because you are going to still die a lot. On his Deep relics, we have Arcane, reduced dex, and then we've got the physical +3 there. Obviously, ultimate charge impaired is not ideal, but it is what it is. On the next relic, we have Vigor and Strength with reduced dex again, but physical attack +4. And then finally, we've got a character skill with physical attack +3. Ironeye's Mark is undoubtedly the best thing in the game for stance breaking. Fists are the best thing in the game for stance breaking. So if we pair those together with a strength version of Ironeye, you can quickly see how much damage you can actually do and how much stance damage you can actually do, which obviously is going to help the team in the long run. So yeah, this is just an honourable mention. It's something that I run a lot for the Ironeye, and it really does make the game easy mode when you're using things like Starfists and stuff like that. So yeah, honourable mention, Ironeye Starfists. Next up, we have undoubtedly the most stylish Nightfarer in the game. And honestly, she has so much versatility, and it really pains me when I see people running the same build consistently, whether that's Dormant Reapers, Dormant Katanas. But if we're being honest, Dormant Reapers is the Duchess's best build. So for the sake of making the video a little bit different today, I'm not gonna tell you to use Dormant Reapers, because Basically, if you want to win, use Dormant Reapers. It is our strongest build by a million miles. You know, it's overpowered. The skill attack stuff is overpowered generally, and I think it needs to be balanced. But regardless, I'm going to show you a different build today. So the build that I like running for her is a Bloodblade build. Now, I do have this relic that I got the other day. Normally, I would just run Bloodblade, but this relic, obviously with the Frost and Bloodblade, is just insane. And it works really well for someone like the Duchess, especially early game. You can basically trivialize a lot of bosses. Of course, we have the Will of the Balance. Now, you can obviously run another Balancer relic, but personally, I get more interest out of the Night Invader, because obviously, if you get all 3 Night Invaders, it's 21%. You're going to be doing Night Invaders anyway, so it just makes sense for me personally. Then that way, you get the 21% damage over everything, so it's not just on L2s. So that's the base relics. Obviously, you know, it's a little bit of a low RNG build. Most people are going to have a Bloodblade, most people are going to have a Night Invader, and, you know, the Will of the Balance is just from doing the Balancers. For the Deep Relics, we have the Vigor Strength with Physical Attack plus Floor. Now, you can set this off. You don't actually need to have this on. I just have this on for extra vigor because you are going to be using Bloodblade, so you're going to be under max HP. So it just helps a little bit with survivability. You do lose a lot of mine, so just take that in consideration. If you're not using Bloodblade and you find something else that, you know, it's going to be FB heavy, you are going to have a bit of a problem. For the second relic, it's the one that we saw earlier on my Wylder build. It's just Physical Attack plus Floor with increased HP. And then finally, we've got an Arcane increase for every rune. Now, this is just to help the Bloodblade. If you go to the runes, you get like an extra 4 Arcane every time you kill one of the bosses from the runes. If you didn't want to do this, you could just, you know, put a Physical Attack plus Floor on, look for skills, or you can switch all 3 of these out for Affinity. So it all depends on what kind of route you want to go. Now, for an honorable mention, we are going to show you my build that I use a lot, and it's probably my favorite melee build for the Duchess. We are using Dormant Colossal Swords. Now, there's a reason for that. Duchess has one of the most broken builds. There's no denying that. In fact, she probably has the most broken build. The best roll in the game, not build, sorry. So, if we pair that with a weapon that has an insanely fast rolling R1, you can see how much damage you can get out of it. Now, of course, as always, we're running the Red Balancer Relic, mostly for the occasionally nullify. But of course, if you're running Dormant Colossals, you can still get a hold of the Godslayer's Greatsword, which works wow for so many bosses. You get like Noster or Caligo, and you can get that. You can still go straight up in for skill attacks, and you can still make an insane build. But if you didn't want to do that, you can get rolling attacks, which rolling attacks are one of the best buffs in the game. They are very rare, but the damage you get from them, like I think the minimum you can get is 20% damage increase, and that's on like, you know, a common weapon. For the purples and blues, it's like 24 and 28. If you're stacking 4 28s, you can imagine how much damage you're going to get from your rolling R1. And remember, the rolling R1 is so fast, it's so easy to do. And it will literally carry you for any kind of boss. So, we've got the Red Balancer Relic, Dormant Colossals, and then on this one, we just got a Night Invader with her character skill, defeating enemies. I never really use defeating enemies. It is broken, but I never really use it. For the Deep Relics, we've got the Physical plus HP that we've seen earlier, and then we've got the Vigor Strength with a +4 Physical. Now, all of that together, you can actually make this build insanely strong. You can be doing like rolling R1s with over 1,000 damage, and that's quite easy. So, you know, obviously it's not Dormant Reapers, Halo Scythe kind of damage, but 1,000 R1 from attack that is insanely quick is obviously very strong. So yeah, that's a honorable mention for the Duchess. Next up, we got the main man himself, the big lad, Raider. Now, Raider is a bit of a tricky one because you can play Raider in so many different ways. He's open to so many different playstyles, and people never, you know, people seem to forget this. You can literally use Fist on Raider, Colossals, Great Swords, Great Spears, any kind of thing like that you can use on Raider. And most of the time, he will out damage every other character for one simple reason. Taking damage whilst using the character skill improves attack power, and also taking attacks improves attack power. These 2 relics alone give you such an insane damage boost that even if you was to pick up a dex weapon, you would still a lot of the time out damage people like the Wylder because you're getting the damage buff every time you use to retaliate. So yeah, just bear that into mind when you're playing with Raider. Now for this build, this is the one that I use quite a lot, and it's not a Dregs build. Obviously, if you want the strongest Raider build, go for Dregs, charge attacks, you're going to basically destroy everything. But for this build, this is what we're using. So damage taken while using the character skill. Of course, this, you get a damage boost. It's a 10% damage boost for your attack power and a 20% damage stamina boost for the Raider. Then we've got the taking attacks improves attack power. This is a 15% damage boost. So both of those relics together, you're already getting like a 25% damage increase just from your every time you take an attack. Then we've got a Night Invader relic with partial HP restoration, very important. And then finally, we've got 3+ colossal weapons. This build can work really well if you want to do like colossal jump attacks. If not, you don't have to use the colossal weapons. You can put basically like an improved colossal or any other relic on there basically. I just like to use this. For the deep relics, we are Raider, so basically we just, you know, stack physical and then we stack HP. Obviously, I have very good relics for both of those. Physical is what you want to go for, and damage negation if you can. But, you know, use what you can use. Honorable mention, we are using a skill build. Now, the reason for that is Raider, as I mentioned earlier, with the damage taken while using character skill, Retaliate, and the taking attack improves attack power, you already get like a 25% damage increase on your damage overall. So if you pair that with a Balancer relic and a Night Invader relic, you can imagine how much damage you're just getting from your base relics. Now, the rest of it is essentially just hit with character skill, reduce attack power, physical attacks, and HP, with some partial HP restoration. But the reason for this build is there are so many options for the Raider, like if you get Stormblade on a Greatsword, if you get the Geezer's Wheel, if you get like Shield Crash, all of these are going to do insane amounts of damage on the Raider. And then you can obviously just, you know, use his poise to be able to tank through most of the enemy attacks that you're going to come across and still do insane amounts of damage. Using skills on the Wylder and the Duchess and people like that, the problem is if you're fighting, let's say, the Misbegotten, he can knock you out of so many of your attacks, or even the, you know, Black Knight Tish. They can knock you out of so many of your attacks. With the Raider and the Guardian, basically you can poise through a lot of their attacks and still get your skill off. So if you're pairing that with partial HP restoration, you know, taking damage, boost damage negation, all those kind of things, you can basically just spam your skill, still doing insane amounts of damage and not die. Obviously, it's a lot harder in depth 5, but, you know, if you do something like this in depth 3, you're going to have such a fun time. So yeah, that's my honorable mention for the Raider. So gamers, that's pretty much it for the builds that I'm currently using in depth 5, and honestly I don't really change these builds out that much. I might put a specific build on for like a certain boss fight, like for example with Nostat. Of course you could just go for a shield fire build or fist, anything like that, you know, it'll work really well. But so there's only specific times where I change these builds out, but these generally are the builds that I use for the 5 Nightfarers mentioned, and I use these consistently in depth 3, 4 and 5. Obviously, the next video is going to cover the rest of the Nightfarers, but hopefully you've learned something from that, gamers. Hopefully you can take something away from this and implement it into your gameplay. As always, stay safe, catch you on the next one. Big love, peace.